Welcome to the June meeting of the Dallas branch of ASCE. I'd like to extend a welcome to all of our members and guests. I'll now turn it over to our committee chairs for other announcements, and we'll have further announcements at the end of the program.
Hi, this is Amanda Coif. I'm one of the social media co-chairs for the ASCE Dallas branch. I have a couple of updates on what's been going on with our social media this month. First of all, if you're not following us yet, I've put our social media handles on the slide so you can find us. We are at ASCE Dallas on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we're ASCE Dallas branch on LinkedIn. The reason to follow us is you'll get the most up-to-date information on what's going on in our branch. We post updates on our monthly meetings, upcoming events, and a lot of other fun stuff, including our latest hashtag Visit ASCE Landmarks campaign. To celebrate ASCE's history and heritage, we're posting pictures that y'all have sent us with your favorite ASCE landmarks. We'll be posting them every Thursday. And if you want your favorite landmark or just a landmark that you visited and you thought was really cool featured, you can send us your pictures by DMing us on any of our social media platforms, or you can email us at socialmedia@ascedallas.org. Just send us your landmark and a brief reason why you like it. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing your submissions.
Hi, I'm Ozzy Gonzalez, our branch's fundraising chair. I would like to take a moment to ask you to consider becoming a branch sponsor. We still have sponsorship opportunities available at all the branch levels and also for this year's joint meeting. If you are interested, please visit our website at dallasac.org or email me at fundraising@dallasac.org. It's because of this engineering community's generosity that we are able to keep going. We greatly appreciate all your support.
ASCE Texas Section's flagship conference, CECon, is going to take place this fall, September 23rd to the 25th. CECon is a place for professionals from across Texas to collaborate and build relationships. It's an annual opportunity where the entire state is represented together and reflects our technical diversity. CECon offers you the opportunity to earn PDHs and participate in legislative and industry panels, have face-to-face interaction with industry suppliers, and opportunities to strengthen relationships with engineers in a wide variety of disciplines. Please visit the Texas Section website at texasce.org to learn more.
If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, you can type it in the chat to the right of the presentation. For today's presentation, we have Frank Pugsley to present on lift station emergency response planning. Frank holds a master's degree in environmental engineering from Texas Tech University and is a licensed professional engineer in the state of Texas. He serves as a director of water and wastewater utilities for the city of Denton. Frank has 17 years of professional engineering design experience, including a variety of municipal infrastructure projects ranging from water and wastewater conveyance, pumping, water treatment processes, chemical systems and hydraulics, stormwater drainage, site civil, and vertical facilities. In addition to design professional, he has served in many roles in his career, holding positions including firm principal, regional practice manager. He is honored to have been selected as ENR Texas and Louisiana Top Young Professional, formerly Top 40 Under 40. Frank is a past president of the Dallas branch of ASCE. I'll turn over to Frank to let us know a little bit more about lift stations.
Thank you, Julie, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today to hear a little bit of discussion on the City of Denton's experience with responding to and then ultimately planning for lift station failures. Most of the times, lift stations in the system silently do their job, but when they do occasionally fail, for various reasons, having a plan up front is the city's best defense to any long-term effects that may cause. The little background on the City of Denton's wastewater utility. Our service area is approximately 100 square miles. We have presently 540 miles of collection and force mains. We have 2 wastewater treatment plants and 31 lift stations, with more on the way as development continues. Lift stations continue to be built in our system. Another thing that is a little bit unique to the City of Denton, we actually have 2 full-time 6-man construction crews on our staff who replace line and respond to emergencies on a full-time basis. The overview of our system, that 100 square miles, is broken up into 6 drainage basins. The drainage basin we're going to discuss primarily today is the Hickory Creek drainage basin, and it is denoted in the blue shade. And the green square at the bottom right of the map is the Hickory Creek lift station, which is the one we will be discussing primarily. Conveniently, it is located adjacent to a creek, as lift stations often are. So any sanitary sewer overflows at that lift station pose an even greater concern to us, as we really have a limited ability and a limited time to contain any overflows prior to an environmental impact. Adjacent to the Hickory Creek lift station, you'll also see is another little green square. I'll bring out my pointer just to point it out a little bit better. This green square is another lift station that is not City of Denton's property. That one belongs to the Upper Trinity Regional Water District and serves their Lantana system. So that's one of the lucky things about this lift station for us, is we have a close partner with a lift station nearby that we can bypass to in the event of a failure. The Hickory Creek lift station, you'll see on the map, is fed by the gravity mains coming in from the west and the east, the red lines on the map, and its force main proceeds to the north, the green lines on the map. This is a piece of the cut sheet from the design phase of the Hickory Creek lift station. It serves an approximately 40 square mile basin. It was constructed in 1984 in a wet well dry pit configuration. The dry pit is 36 feet deep below natural grade. When it was constructed, it had a firm capacity of 3,500 GPM, or about 5 MGD, with 3 pumps. As of today, only 2 of those pumps are functional, and it discharges to a 24-inch diameter pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipe force main that is about 12,000 feet long. The average daily flow at this lift station is 3 MGD. And a couple of things I'll point out on the cut sheet from the lift station is in the dry well, there is a plug valve at the bottom that can be operated to isolate a pump from the wet well. However, those plug valves cannot be operated unless you're in the dry well. There's no motor operator, and there's no way to operate the valve from above grade. In addition, in the collection system just upstream of the wet well, there are no stop logs or no valves to isolate the lift station in the event of any kind of failure inside the dry well, which is what we've experienced and what we'll discuss here shortly. Here's a timeline of all the failures we've experienced at Hickory Creek lift station in the last several years. Each of these events resulted in us filing a declaration of emergency to help us facilitate purchases outside of the normal procurement process so we can respond to this quickly. I'll run down the list briefly, and we'll highlight a few of these as we go forward. So in February 2018, pump number 3 failed. The actual pump casing that contains the impeller was broken by what we believe to be a piece of concrete that was ingested by the pump. And that resulted in a sanitary sewer overflow of about 720,000 gallons. In December 2018, a few short months later, we had an electrical anomaly, which we believed caused a surge in the force main, causing a force main rupture. That resulted in a 300,000 gallon sanitary sewer overflow. About a year after that, Thanksgiving of 2019, we had another similar electrical event at the facility that caused another surge and also caused a failure in some of the mechanical piping in the lift station, and we had about a 490,000 gallon SSO. Then in March 2020, the pump bearings, the motor bearings, the pump bearings in the number 1 pump failed, and we did not have an SSO at that time because the second pump was able to take care of the flow. Then in April 2020 of this year, we're actually under construction right now to replace this lift station. It's long overdue, but the contractor was implementing some bypass pumping, and their plug that they set in our 27-inch vitrified clay tile pipe actually cracked the pipe, and the plug became dislodged and slid into the wet well, blocking the intake to the pumps. And that caused a relatively small overflow of 7,500 gallons. And finally, in May of this year, just last month, we were able to purchase a permanent bypass pump for this facility so that we hope to not have an additional overflow between now and the time our new lift station is ready to be put online. So the December 2018 event, I'm going to start with that one because I joined the city in June of 2018, so I wasn't around for the February event. But December 2018, at about 1:56 p.m., the wastewater plant received a VFD failure alarm on pump number 1. The staff was able to go down to the lift station and determine that the fuses in the VFD had blown. Pump number 2 is a constant speed pump. They started pump number 2 at 2:30. And then a short 13 minutes later, our utilities dispatch operator received a call from a resident concerning sewer coming out of the ground. And about 15 minutes after that, our staff arrived at their residence. We believed at the time that it was an air relief valve behind their house that was leaking. It turns out the force main running through an easement in his backyard had failed and was discharging into his yard. And 4:28 p.m., we fully shut down the lift station and prepared to overflow at the lift station. And about 11 p.m. the following day, we were able to actually complete the repairs to the force main. And I'll share some photos of that process and the site where we experienced that. So that, and also that time frame from 3 o'clock to 4:28, we still had flow going through the force main. We weren't losing everything, but we were trying to keep as much overflow contained out of the creek and into our collection system as possible while we decided on our course of action. This is an aerial photograph with our GIS overlaying on it. And of course, municipal GIS and any GIS program aren't entirely accurate all the time from a spatial standpoint. It shows the 24-inch force main running kind of closer to the house to the west. That 24-inch force main actually runs directly to the east side of that fence line where the blue arrow is pointing. So we had a pretty large failure right in someone's backyard. Whenever we got to the site, after we shut down the lift station, we were able to excavate the force main in the resident's yard. You'll see conveniently on top of the force main in the photo on the left side, there is a nice yellow gas line that we weren't aware was there. Fortunately, with utility locates, of course, we were able to find it prior to any kind of other incidents, but it's always interesting to see how other utilities use public utility easements without really anyone's knowledge. And the picture on the right was one of the earlier excavation pictures. This little white spot down here floating is actually a 5-gallon bucket, and you can see in the photo the failure in the pipe was on the side of the pipe right at a joint. So it's just downstream of a pipe joint, and the failure is about 3 feet long or 2.5 feet long, about the size of a 5-gallon bucket. And what we kind of theorize caused this failure here is the homeowner had planted a significant amount of trees in the easement over the last many years, and we believe those tree roots may have intruded, impinged on the pipe joint a little bit and caused some failures in the mortar coating and created a weak spot there. And it just happened to be when we started up the constant speed pump this day that was the last straw on this pipeline. That next day, I mentioned we were able to have it repaired by the next evening. Here's a couple photos. The one on the left are the 2 contractors from Rangeline Pipe Services pumping down the pipe so they can complete their cleaning and welding. And the picture on the right is the final installed butt strap around the pipe joint, as well as the additional welding over the failure point and the port on top so we can regrout that part. And then a concrete diaper is poured around that piece. So we repaired the force main, and we're able to go about our business after that. Some important things that we learned during this event, as I mentioned, we had several 100,000 gallons of overflow. We did implement a temporary bypass solution. We were called out a rental company. They set pumps and ran hose to the Upper Trinity lift station. It turns out that you really can't drive across bypass hose, so we actually had to shut down a street for a couple of days, and it's a popular cut through in Denton, so we definitely heard about it from our residents and from council regarding the impact to the residents in this situation. And also, as we were overflowing, as I mentioned, the lift stations directly adjacent to a creek, Hickory Creek. Whenever wastewater discharges into a receiving stream, it can result in dissolved oxygen crash in the stream. Fortunately, this was wintertime when dissolved oxygen is a little higher, but what we implemented was a sparging system with several small gasoline-powered 2-inch stormwater pumps with just a suction line dropped into the creek, and just discharging right back into the creek to help agitate the water and incorporate a little bit more oxygen if we can in an effort to prevent any fish kill or as little environmental impact as we can. Over the course of these couple of days, the TCEQ did come visit us, take a look at the overflow, and wrote the report. And we got that back a few months later, and we were assessed, I believe, a penalty in the $13,000 to $15,000 range for that. After this event in 2018, we put our heads together and decided that the response was a little slower than we would like, and that, of course, the failure occurred in the afternoon. I believe it might have even been on a Friday, and the rental company we called is in South Fort Worth. So it took them and what felt like a very long time to make it from South Fort Worth with bypass pumps and the bypass hoses. We decided to be a good practice for the city to own a lot of our own equipment so we can implement these ourselves. So what the director prior to me did, he, with our recommendation, purchased a mile of 10-inch lay flat hose in 8 segments. They come on a big hose reel. And we also have a hydraulically operated unroller so we can actually unfurl the hose and lay it out when we need it. We purchased a new 6-inch pump and a new 8-inch pump to complement the 10-inch pump we own and the 4-inch pump we own. So that brings us to November 2019. Again, that was another electrical anomaly, 490,000 gallons. So we call this our Thanksgiving 2019 event. This was Sunday, November 24th, the Sunday before Thanksgiving last year. We got a call from our operators at the plant with another issue potentially at the Hickory Creek lift station. About 10 a.m., some of our staff mobilized to the site quickly, and what they discovered was wastewater spilling out of the ground level door out of the dry pit side of the lift station. So it's pretty much a worst case scenario for us in that sense. We immediately contacted Upper Trinity, the TCEQ, and our city manager's office and public affairs office because we knew this was probably going to be a significant spill. Upper Trinity has been very gracious in helping us out and accepting our wastewater flow in some of these situations, but we understand that they don't have an unlimited capacity, and we need to be good neighbors as well and not take advantage of their generosity. We again contacted the rental company Sunbelt to provide us bypass equipment. We called and said, please bring us exactly what you brought us last time. And by 3:59 that afternoon, we had set up a bypass pump in a manhole near the lift station with our own hose going to Upper Trinity. It's not a very significant bypass, but we were trying to minimize the overflow as much as we possibly could. By 10:30 p.m., Sunbelt had got their system up and running. This time they brought drive-over ramps so that we could connect the hoses and still let traffic go through. And they had their pumps set up and began bypassing flow to Upper Trinity. As I mentioned, the dry well was completely submerged. So over the course of Monday and Tuesday, we worked 24 hours a day trying to get the dry well pumped down enough so we could actually see what was going on in the lift station so we could determine what the failure was and make a repair. We brought in a contractor. As I mentioned, we don't have any stop logs or any way to stop flow from entering the dry well once there's been a failure. So what we did is we took one of those large white aggregate sacks. I call them super sacks. I think they hold a ton of sand or gravel. We filled one of those with individual sandbags and lowered it into the upstream manhole in an attempt to plug the flow going into the lift station so we could make an effort to pump it down. We again declared an emergency so that we could work with our purchasing department to make the necessary purchases. We had our public affairs office send press releases, and we continued pumping for those 2 days. Our environmental services group began doing stream water quality testing in Hickory Creek, both upstream and downstream of the lift station all the way to Lake Louisville. Again, the TCEQ visited us, so we walked the project with them. Finally, we were able to pump the lift station down far enough to discover the damage. And what happened in this case was the surge in this event, the check valve on pump number 1 apparently slammed shut very hard, and then when the pump tripped on and then back off, there was another surge, and it actually broke the discharge elbow off of the pump, and it sheared through the ductile iron 90-degree bend, and it was just laying on the floor, and all the valve and piping stack that was on the discharge side had just slid off and was sitting on the bottom of the lift station. So when the pump was running, it was just pumping right into the lift station, and without a way to shut it off, it's just flowing directly into the lift station. Later that day, the sand plug failed, and we had to regroup, and the lift station again flooded, and we had to replace the sand plug to get it pumped down again. So Wednesday and Thursday, we continued our stream sampling. We received the pump parts we needed. This lift station, being designed in 1984, had some odd pipe sizing. The discharge on the pumps is 10-inch, and we needed a new check valve and new fittings that were 10-inch ductile iron, and we were able to find those in Chicago and have them expedited to Denton for our repair. We were able to make repairs to the lift station and restore normal operation. We left the bypass equipment in place for several days after that, just to be sure everything was in ship shape and we weren't going to have another failure. The following week, December 3rd through the 9th, we sent additional press releases documenting that the overflow had stopped. We had Rangeline come back out again in order to place a temporary valve on our force main so we could do some additional maintenance in the lift station. I forgot to mention this earlier, but we actually did have to issue a boil water notice for citizens in the vicinity who are using water wells as their primary drinking source. And that week we made permanent repairs to pump number 1 using parts from the old pump number 3 that had failed in February 2018. And we restored pump number 1 to its full operational capacity. And at that point in time, we had full redundancy with 2 pumps at the lift station again. We were very excited. Again, I have some fun photos. The picture on the right is what our staff discovered when they arrived at the lift station. That's very bad news when you show up and there's 36 feet of wastewater inside your dry well. You can see in the center of the photo, the motors for the pumps are above the natural surrounding ground level, so that's a bonus for us in that sense. Is we didn't have too much motor damage in that case. Pump number 2 motor did sustain some damage, and we had to send it off to be rewound after this. The photo on the right shows the bypass pumps that Sunbelt had set up, the 2 green pumps, and then the blue pump is one of the City of Denton's pumps. And the picture on the left, if you recall the section view of the lift station, there are 2 flights of stairs going down. Basically, at this point, we had pumped it down far enough to see the first landing of the stairway. And once we pumped it down a little bit farther, you could start to see what was going on inside the lift station. You can see on the right side of that photo, the waterproof, explosion-proof lights are doing great because that light is still underwater. It's still on. We still had about 10 feet of wastewater in the lift station at this point. And we finally got it pumped down enough where we could see the pumps. I'm going to bring up my pointer. You can see this is pump number 1 on the left side, and wastewater is just gravity flowing out of the pump. And it should have a discharge 90 and a check valve leading into the vertical discharge riser in the header. And you can see all that apparatus is just missing from this pump completely. So without any way to stop flow coming into the lift station, the flow is just gravity flowing through the pump out into the lift station and out the door at the top. Oops, I'm sorry, I forgot the last picture. The second picture there is the line stopple or temporary valve that Rangeline installed for us. We had that placed so that we could prevent the full volume of the force main from running back into the lift station while we were making repairs. And we are fortunate that we did that at the time because it's come in handy since then as a bypass option for the lift station. Here's a map showing this time where we put the hoses and the drive-over piping. Our lift station in the top left, we had about 1,200 feet of 8-inch hose in parallel, and we put the drive-over ramps for traffic to pass on Old Alton Road, where we were able to discharge to the Opportunity lift station to the southeast. All right, back to the timeline. We're going to bring it to March of this year. Pump number 1, the motor bearings down in the dry pit began to fail, and we shut down the pump permanently in March and began crossing our fingers that pump number 2 wouldn't have any issues. And that was followed up by the April failure by the contractor, and then the May installation of our new pump. So as I mentioned, in March of this year, pump number 1 completely failed. We shut it down permanently and could use it in an emergency. It is unknown how long it would actually run, and that left pump number 2 as our only operational pump for a period of time. As I mentioned before, we're installing or constructing a new lift station right next door, and it has larger pumps that are going to be placed in it. We are hoping to have those on site already. Due to the COVID crisis, they were held up in Europe for a little while, and I think they finally shown up, but we were able to actually find a matching used pump that is the same exact pump we're placing in the new lift station to purchase as a permanent bypass pump. So we're able to purchase that pump out of New Jersey, and we have temporarily installed it in the wet well of the lift station and run HDPE hard pipe to that stopple connection that Rangeline created for us. So in May of this year, that pump arrived and was installed, and when we run that pump connected to the VFD in the lift station, we're able to actually get 6.2 MGD at that pump at full speed. So we're very pleased with that permanent bypass solution, and in retrospect, kind of wish we would have done that from the beginning instead of having waited this long. But as we were under construction with the new lift station, we honestly expected the lift station to be able to last a few more months each time prior to each subsequent failure. Let's get into the dollars a little bit. We've spent quite a bit of money on these 3 events, and this doesn't count the TCEQ penalties and fines that we've incurred. And I don't have the cost of the February 2018 event. But in December, we spent about $115,000 plus our equipment time that we didn't get billed to the job. And that's in-house staff time and rental equipment and repairs. After that event, we purchased about $200,000 worth of bypass pumping equipment. And we haven't accounted for all that cost yet either. We're still waiting on a few pieces of equipment and fittings that we haven't gotten yet. And then in November of last year, we spent about $230,000. And then in March, to purchase that permanent pump and that bypass connection, we spent another $125,000. So all said and done, we've spent $675,000 over the course of basically a year and a half in patching our lift station together. So after all these events, we had some recurring questions. Each time we had a failure at Hickory Creek, we had to remind ourselves what we did last time and asked ourselves, why are we reinventing this response each time? We need to have a better plan. By the time it happened the 3rd time, we were getting pretty good at it, but we decided that if this happens somewhere else, we don't need to be trying to figure it out. We need to know what we're doing before we get there on site. We also wanted to answer the question, why don't we own everything we need to do the bypass pumping on our own, so we're not at the mercy of a rental contractor taking hours to deploy and set up their equipment. At the November 2019 event, we were going to try and do that on our own bypass, but we discovered that we were missing some critical components, and I'll kind of talk about those in a minute when we discuss what we purchased lately. Each time we have to issue a public notice, and we're always trying to dig up the old public notice document. And every time you dig up an old document on the server, you're bound to choose one that's an out-of-date version or one that you had to edit. A couple of times we missed some critical language that's required by the TCEQ, so we actually had to issue the public notice multiple times for a single event just to make sure we got all of the notice documentation correct. And who are we going to call at TCEQ? Now we're on a pretty good first-name basis with a lot of the folks at the region office, but at the time, we're on Google trying to figure out who we call at TCEQ region. A lot of the times the office is closed whenever these occur, so we just needed to have good contact information for the staff at TCEQ so we can keep them in the loop. At the city, we've also had significant leadership transitions that have led to a lot of knowledge loss on these systems. As I mentioned, the previous director prior to me retired last year. He had a lot of intimate knowledge of everything in our system, and without him here, we don't necessarily have the people who have been here for 20 years anymore to remind us where everything is and what some options are for us. So based on that, we decided we needed a lift station emergency response plan. And this is really the biggest piece of the presentation that I think is impactful for cities or consultants moving forward is, what are you doing to prepare for the unexpected? We have 31 lift stations that we operate today. If another lift station failed tomorrow, would we know what to do immediately to bypass that lift station and mitigate any potential environmental impacts? So we needed to determine, what does this emergency response plan need to say? What data is necessary? We need to have maps. We need to show where the lift station is. We need to show where the collection system is. We need to show where our first force main goes. We need system curves of the first force main and pump curves for our bypass pumps so we can match an appropriate pump with an appropriate system curve. We can't just take any old pump out to any old lift station and expect it to work. We need to have a detailed list of equipment that's required for each lift station for each bypass so that our staff don't have to go hunting around to try and figure out what they need. They can just go to the checklist, make sure they have it all in the trailer, and run out there and do their jobs. We need to know which lift stations actually have bypass capability. Some of ours are built in with the bypass connection. Some of them are not. We just decided to be really helpful for our staff to have site photos in the plan so that they can actually look at the plan and get an idea of what they're getting into before they show up on site, where they can park the pump, where they can park their vehicles. And we need to assign an incident commander so we don't have too many cooks in the kitchen. We need to have one person who's in charge of coordinating the response. Here's a couple examples. They're a little bit small of the pages of our draft emergency response plan. We have pertinent information like the lift station capacity, the wet well capacity. We have the, the head requirements of the force main. We have an equipment list for what exactly the guys need to bring to the site. And that is everything down from our vac trucks for vacuuming up spillage, down to the hose and fittings and pumps we need. We have a map of where the lift station is and where a temporary force main would need to be placed. And we have photos of the site so that they can get a visual of what they're showing up to, where they can park that trailer, like I mentioned. And then we have the lift station bypass procedures, what they need to accomplish when they get on site to bypass the lift station in the event of a power failure and or a force main failure. A power failure and a force main failure could be very different things depending upon the lift station. And just to go into why we need good maps and why we need good instructions, this is a GIS printout from an area of our system. Right in the middle of the drawing is our Hobson lift station. And if that lift station were to fail, as you can see, it's of course, again, adjacent to a creek. We don't have much time to prevent spill into a receiving stream. If our guys showed up on site and we asked them to run a bypass hose somewhere, there are a lot of manholes in the vicinity that they could choose from. They could run just to the west and discharge into the manhole in this neighborhood. But guess what? This one flows to the south, goes off the page, and then comes back to the north, back to the Hobson lift station. So that's a bad idea. They could run across into this neighborhood, but again, this neighborhood runs down and back to the lift station. They could run over to one of these manholes, but again, those all run back to the lift station. It turns out in this case, they need to go 4,000 feet to the east to a manhole where they can actually bypass and get out of the basin of that lift station. So without that kind of detail, our staff would be really struggling looking at GIS maps, trying to follow flow lines to find a manhole where they can go. So based on this, the lessons learned that we've got are to establish an emergency response plan, designate a scribe and a central point of contact for these events. Someone needs to be taking notes as well as in addition to having the incident commander and point of contact. If we're all trying to take our own notes and we're all trying to coordinate activities independently, we're we're going to be stepping over each other, and we're going to be talking to the same people twice about the same things, and that leads to inefficiencies. We've got to have standard documents for public notices and press releases that we know are in good shape. We can just fill out the pertinent information and be able to deliver those quickly to the press and to the TCEQ. We now have good lines of communication for various departments. Our water and wastewater utilities have gotten very comfortable working together. Our wastewater crews and our water crews are always willing to lend a hand to each other. We have to establish the working parameters for what we're encountering. On some of these, they were multi-day events. We can't have our staff working 16 or 24 or 30 hours straight, which have occurred in the past. That leads to fatigue and potentially human error and could put our staff at risk. So we've established some parameters about how long we can actually have people working these events. And then the documentation process, trying to establish a timeline of everything that occurred in retrospect is really difficult when you're talking with 15 people, trying to look through text messages and emails and phone logs to find out when things were communicated and what happened. And that's what the scribe and the point of contact are designed to do, is help with that documentation process. So we've got all this information at the ready so we can prepare our description to our council, to the TCEQ, without having to really recreate the event. And again, our bypass equipment and materials need to be ready. And I'm going to talk about what bypass equipment we've got today and why it didn't work in November of last year. So the things we bought the first time, as I mentioned, were lay flat hose. It just folds flat and it rolls up on a reel, so it's easy to transport. And then we have a 10, an 8, a 6, and a 4-inch pump, diesel trailer mounted pumps. One of the things that we were unable to purchase the first time around was a trailer to put the hose on. So the hose is sitting in a storage unit on our site at the service center. So if we were to need that hose quickly, we have to then go load it on a trailer that we probably first had to unload. So we need to have that equipment on a trailer ready to go. We need the road ramps for crossing streets with our hose. And we need the proper couplings to connect to the road ramps. We also need 10-inch adapters for various size pumps and fittings. So these are some of the things we didn't own until recently. We need 10-inch O-rings for the fittings on the hose, which we didn't have enough 10-inch O-rings. One of the things that we also didn't have was a 2-inch air release valve or air vent on the discharge for those pumps where we connect to the hose, and a 10-inch check valve on those hoses, and some 10-inch 45 and 90-degree bends for where we need to make direction changes where the hose just won't be able to curve around. So the air release valve and the check valve are really important. One of the things we didn't think about up front is if we had just laid 10-inch lay flat hose connected directly to a stormwater or the diesel mounted pumps to a manhole where we could bypass, that would work. But what we didn't really think through all the way was what happens when we shut that down. Now we've got a 10-inch hose that's full of wastewater, and how do we get that out, and how do we uncouple the hoses without spilling the wastewater that's now sitting in the hose? So we need to have that check valve to stop anything from flowing back through the pumps, and we need that 2-inch connection for an air release valve. And also that 2-inch connection will allow us to connect a water line from a fire hydrant or other source, so we can then flush the remaining wastewater out of the hose, so we're not worried about a failure or a leak from the removal of all that equipment. So again, I just kind of want to rehash where I think these things are important is, the city of Denton is a medium-sized utility. We do have, water and wastewater crews, wastewater plants, a fairly large collection system for a city our size. But we weren't fully prepared to address unforeseen failures at lift stations or any other kind of wastewater failures that are significant in magnitude. And these events over the last couple of years have really forced us to put a lot of thought into it, prepare some documentation. So I think what I hope people can take away from this discussion is that if cities don't have such a plan, or if you are a consultant for a city, it's worth asking the question, are you ready for an event like this, because as ready as we think we are, if we don't have it prepared and written down up front before we go into the event, then I don't think that you're prepared as prepared as you think you are. And with that, I would like to also make some special thanks, of course, to Upper Trinity Regional Water District for always being a great partner and neighbor to us. While we're discharging and bypassing to the lift station, we have to maintain close coordination with them, because it would be very possible for us to overwhelm their lift station and subsequently their treatment plant. Denton County, we had to work with Denton County in the last couple of events because the area around Hickory Creek and our lift station is a county park. The TCEQ has been helpful and cooperative in coordinating with us, and we definitely maintain close communication with them in all these events. And of course, our City of Denton staff, we've had hundreds of man hours and lots of guys working tirelessly for days on end to make these situations as insignificant as possible. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Frank, let me start. This is Mark Boyd. I wanted to thank you for returning to the Dallas branch, even though our meetings look a lot different than from the days you were our president. My question is, and I'm sure it looks like a lot of hard work. Did you get any sleep during all this time?
I probably got more than our field crews. So yeah, these were definitely some long nights for some extended periods of time. Yes, we're out there till midnight, 1 a.m. occasionally if we had to be. So it was some stressful times for sure. This wasn't our only large failure we had in that period of time, but it's the one that happened at this lift station.
All right.
This is Carlos. Frank, I have another question for you. Were any of the costs to responding to the Hickory Station events or repairing the issues that occurred, were they somehow budgeted as a contingency or planned for, or where did you manage to get that budget from?
That's a good question. No, the costs that $675,000 we spent were not budgeted expenditures, so that definitely affects some other pieces of our budget. We do have system maintenance and operation money that we do budget every year. We're able to pull from some of that. And when capital projects complete under budget, we are able to roll some of that money into some unallocated fund accounts we're able to pull from in emergencies like this. So we did have the funding available, but it does affect our planning. And it's really difficult to budget for those kind of things that are unforeseen, especially in a municipal setting where we're really trying hard to be good stewards of the ratepayers' money. They're the ones who are really paying for all this in their water and sewer bills.
Frank, this is Nancy Klein. Are there any other lift stations like the Hickory Station that you plan on replacing or rehabilitating?
Absolutely. We do have a handful of older lift stations. Hickory Creek is our largest by far with that firm capacity of 5 MGD. Most of ours are in the hundreds of GPM to maybe a couple thousand GPM. But we do have 4 or 5 lift stations that are on the smaller side that are similar or older in age than Hickory Creek. And that's something we're budgeting for, I believe, beginning next fiscal year or the following to kind of do a lift station assessment program as well as a lift station replacement program based on our findings from that activity.
Frank, in the case of an emergency, is there any kind of remote technology that can be used where you can shut off a lift station or close valves and reroute the wastewater elsewhere without having to physically be in the field?
We definitely can control our lift stations remotely. They're all connected via the SCADA network to the wastewater plant. That's how we do get the VFD alarms and other high water alarms that tip us off to these problems. The problem with a lift station is it's usually at the lowest point in that particular wastewater sewer shed. So yes, we can shut it off, but then there's really nowhere else for the sewer to go. It's going to keep coming to the lift station and it's not going to stop. So that's why we need to be able to respond, and any city needs to be able to respond quickly and effectively to bypass that flow if you're not able to restore full lift station capacity in a short period of time. The wet well can contain, depending on the lift station, anywhere from a few hours to less of wastewater. The larger the flow and the smaller the wet well, the shorter time period we've got. Some of our smaller flow lift stations can be managed with just a vac truck, for that matter. But yeah, no, once the lift station stops, the wastewater does not stop also.
Hey Frank, this is Denton. Do you guys have plans to implement permanent bypasses for all of your lift stations and standardize the hookups to take some of the guesswork out for your crew?
That's definitely on our to-do list. Every new lift station we construct today or is built by a developer is required to have bypass with cam locks that are compatible with our equipment. And we do occasionally go back and retrofit our lift stations and force mains with a bypass connection. And that's going to be part of our lift station evaluation program that we're going to be starting in a year or two, would be to really decide which ones need to get a bypass connection installed. Now those, the bypass connection is great for a power failure or a pump failure, because generally they are on site at the lift station. But if you had a force main failure somewhere downstream, that's not going to do us any good either, though. But they're definitely a big piece of the puzzle that we need.
I guess to follow up, how many lift stations do you have in the city?
We have 31 lift stations today, and I think there are 2 or 3 that are under construction or in the planning phases right now as part of development.
Frank, we want to thank you for being willing to speak to us today. It's been great hearing how the City of Denton responds to emergencies. This is a great example of learning from the past and implementing those items to future planning. This month, we'll also have the Construction Institute Technical Seminar. Dustin Douglas with GeoPure Foundation Company will present on GeoPure Foundation systems and applications. This presentation will also be on our YouTube channel, and you can find the link in our announcement. We'll continue to work with the institutes each month to see if they are still meeting. Next month, we'll have a virtual joint meeting with Fort Worth on July 17th. We're planning to have morning sessions, the lunchtime presentation, and then followed by ethics. As we finalize the times and presenters, we will send those out. We'll be monitoring local protocol to determine if we will have an online or in-person presentation in August. We'll communicate that when we decide it. Keep watching your emails in the Dallas Branch social media for more updates. You should see a link below the presentation in the description, which will take you to Google Form. This is how we'll know who to send the PDH certificate to. On the form, there's a code that you'll need to type in to receive the certificate. The code is Denton. If you have any trouble with this, please let us know at info@dallasasce.org or any of our social media platforms. The link will remain live until the end of June for you to get your PDH certificate. Again, the code is Denton. If you have any additional questions you want to ask our speaker today, please put those in the comments section and we'll send those to him and get you the response. Again, thanks for attending the virtual Dallas Branch meeting, and I hope you have a great week. With that, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thanks for joining us.